Welcome, warriors and shield maidens, to VK Tales, your Skald, ready to take you on epic journeys through the icy fjords and blood-soaked battlefields of the Viking world. Before we begin, raise your mead horns and swear loyalty to our clan. Subscribe to the channel, tell us in the comments which village you're watching from, and raise your thumbs as a sign of approval to the gods and click the like button. Now, settle in close to the fire, because I jolted awake, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was pitch black, save for a sliver of moonlight sneaking through the gap in my curtains. Something felt off. The air was heavy, pressing down on me like a weighted blanket. But it wasn't the oppressive atmosphere that had startled me from my slumber. It was the silence. Whispering Pines was never truly quiet. The chirping of crickets, the gentle rustling of leaves, the distant howl of a wolf. These were the lullabies that usually sang me to sleep. But now, nothing. The silence was deafening, unnatural. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my bare feet touching the cold wooden floor. The floorboards creaked under my weight as I made my way to the window. Pulling back the curtains, I gazed out at the village. Everything looked normal, bathed in the soft glow of the full moon. Yet, the wrongness persisted. Sleep eluded me for the rest of the night. As the first rays of sunlight painted the sky, I decided to start my day early. There was firewood to be chopped, and the physical labor might help shake off this uneasy feeling. The village was slowly coming to life as I made my way to the communal woodpile. Old Man Johnson was already up, tending to his prized tomatoes. "Mornin', Leif," he called out, his gravelly voice breaking the eerie quiet. "You're up with the sun today." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Morning, Mr. Johnson. Just couldn't sleep, thought I'd get an early start." He grunted, turning back to his plants. "Strange night, wasn't it? Never heard the forest so quiet." So, I wasn't the only one who'd noticed. That was both comforting and unsettling. I reached the woodpile and grabbed the axe, its familiar weight grounding me. The repetitive motion of chopping wood usually cleared my mind, but today, each strike of the axe against the log seemed to echo unnaturally in the still air. That's when I heard it. At first I thought it was just the wind, a gentle breeze finally breaking the unnatural silence. But as I paused, axe mid-swing, I realized it was something else entirely. A whisper, so faint I could barely make it out, seemed to be coming from the forest to the north. "Leif!" I dropped the axe, spinning around to face the tree line. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet morning. "Is someone there?" No response came, just the faint whisper dancing on the edge of my hearing. I took a step towards the forest, then another. The whisper grew slightly louder, almost beckoning. "Leif, there you are!" I jumped, turning to see Sarah jogging towards me. Her long brown hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and concern clouded her usually bright green eyes. "Sarah," I breathed, relief washing over me. Did you hear that?" Well, she frowned, coming to a stop beside me. "Hear what?" "I've been looking all over for you. There's an emergency village meeting being called." I cast one last glance at the forest before allowing Sarah to lead me towards the village square. "A meeting? What's going on?" Sarah shook her head, her ponytail swaying with the motion. "I'm not sure, but everyone's talking about strange noises coming from the forest. Some are saying they heard whispers." My blood ran cold. So, it wasn't just me. The village square was packed by the time we arrived. The usual chatter that accompanied such gatherings was absent, replaced by tense silence and worried glances. Mayor Thompson stood on the raised platform at the center, his normally jovial face etched with concern. "Folks," he began, his booming voice carrying across the square, "I know many of you have experienced unusual occurrences last night and this morning. I've called this meeting so we can discuss these events and decide on a course of action." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Beside me, Sarah squeezed my hand. "Now, who would like to share their experience?" Mayor Thompson asked. For a moment, nobody moved. Then old Mrs. Peterson raised a trembling hand. I heard whispers, she said, her voice quavering. Coming from the north woods. They were calling my name. More voices joined in, each story similar yet uniquely terrifying. The forest whispering, calling out to individuals, an unnatural silence blanketing the village. As I listened, a chill ran down my spine. Something was very wrong in Whispering Pines. Suddenly, a commotion at the edge of the crowd caught my attention. People were parting, making way for someone. My heart leapt when I recognized the figure stumbling towards the center. "Jack!" I called out, pushing through the crowd to reach my best friend. But as I got closer, I realized something was terribly wrong. Jack's clothes were torn and dirty, his hair a wild mess. But it was his eyes that truly frightened me. They were glazed over, unfocused, as if he was looking at something none of us could see. "Jack," I said, grabbing his shoulders. "Jack, what happened? Where have you been?" He turned those vacant eyes to me, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of recognition. Then, in a voice that didn't sound entirely like his own, he spoke. "The forest. It calls. It whispers. Such beautiful whispers." A hush fell over the crowd. Mayor Thompson pushed through, placing a gentle hand on Jack's arm. "Son, what do you mean? What did the forest say?" Jack's gaze drifted to the mayor, then past him, towards the northern tree line. A small, unsettling smile curved his lips. "It wants us. All of us. We must go. We must answer." With that, Jack's eyes rolled back in his head and he collapsed. I barely managed to catch him before he hit the ground. As chaos erupted around us, people shouting for the doctor and voicing their fears, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The forest to the north had begun to whisper, and I had a sinking feeling that nothing in Whispering Pines would ever be the same again. The days following Jack's disturbing appearance at the village meeting were filled with a palpable tension. Whispers from the forest grew more frequent, and with each passing day, more villagers succumbed to their eerie call. I watched helplessly as friends and neighbors I'd known my entire life transformed into hollow shells of themselves, their eyes glazed over with the same vacant stare Jack had worn. On the 5th day, I found myself pacing outside Martha's cottage, the village elder. If anyone knew what was happening, it would be her. I raised my hand to knock, but before my knuckles could touch the worn wood, the door swung open. "I've been expecting you, Leif," Martha said, her wise eyes twinkling despite the grave situation. "Come in, child, we have much to discuss." I followed her into the dimly lit interior, the scent of herbs and incense heavy in the air. Martha lowered herself into a creaking rocking chair, gesturing for me to take a seat across from her. "You've come about the whispers, haven't you?" she asked, though it sounded more like a statement than a question. I nodded, leaning forward. "Martha, what's happening to our village, to our people?" The old woman sighed, her wrinkled hands clasping tightly in her lap. "What I'm about to tell you may be hard to believe, Leif, but you must listen carefully. An ancient evil is awakening in the forest." "Evil?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "What kind of evil?" Martha's eyes grew distant, as if seeing something beyond the confines of her small cottage. Long ago, before Whispering Pines was founded, these lands were home to powerful spirits. One spirit in particular was known for its insatiable hunger for human essence. Our ancestors managed to trap it within the heart of the forest, but it seems the seal is weakening. I felt a chill run down my spine. And the whispers? The people who've changed? The spirit is calling to them, feeding on their life force, Martha explained, her voice heavy with sorrow. Those who answer the call become mere vessels for its growing power. As if to punctuate her words, a commotion erupted outside. We rushed to the window to see a crowd gathering around the village square. In the center stood Thomas, the village blacksmith, his muscular frame trembling with barely contained energy. "We have to go back," Thomas was shouting, his eyes wild and unfocused. "The forest needs us." Several villagers tried to calm him, but Thomas swatted them away like flies. I gasped as I watched him effortlessly lift a heavy wooden bench and hurl it across the square. My God, I breathed. How is that possible? Martha's face was grim. The spirit grants them unnatural strength, but at a terrible cost. They lose themselves in the process. We watched as it took 6 men to finally subdue Thomas, binding him with ropes. As they dragged him away, his anguished cries echoed through the village. We have to do something, I said, turning to Martha. There must be a way to stop this. The old woman nodded slowly. There might be, but it's dangerous. We need to know more about the spirit and how it was trapped. The answers lie within the forest itself. My heart raced at the implication. You mean, go into the forest? But that's suicide. It may be our only hope, Martha replied softly. Someone must brave the whispers and uncover the truth. Before I could respond, the cottage door burst open. Sarah stood in the doorway, her face pale and streaked with tears. Leif, she cried, rushing into my arms. Oh, Leif, it's terrible. I held her tight, feeling her body shake with sobs. Sarah, what's wrong? What happened? She pulled back, her green eyes wide with fear. It's my father. He's gone into the forest. I tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. The whispers, Leif. He said they were calling him home. My blood ran cold. Sarah's father, Harold, was one of the village elders and a pillar of the community. If even he had succumbed to the whispers, how much longer before the entire village was lost? We have to go after him, I said, already moving towards the door. Sarah grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. No, you can't go into the forest. I can't lose you too. I cupped her face in my hands, wiping away her tears with my thumbs. Sarah, listen to me. If we don't do something, we're going to lose everyone. I have to try. Then I'm coming with you, she declared, her jaw set with determination. No, Martha's voice cut through our exchange. We turned to see the old woman standing, leaning heavily on her cane. Leif must go alone. The spirit's influence is strong, and 2 are more likely to fall than 1. Sarah opened her mouth to protest, but I squeezed her hand, silencing her. She's right, Sarah. I need you here safe. Promise me you won't follow. Conflict warred in her eyes, but finally she nodded. Promise me you'll come back to me, she whispered. I promise, I said, sealing the vow with a kiss. As I prepared to leave, gathering supplies and a weapon, Martha pulled me aside. Remember, Leif, she warned, the whispers will try to tempt you. They'll promise you your heart's desires. You must stay strong. I nodded, the weight of the task ahead settling heavily on my shoulders. As I stood at the edge of the village, the dark forest looming before me, I heard Sarah call out one last time, Leif, I love you. I turned back, memorizing her face, using it as an anchor against the whispers I knew I'd face. I love you too, I called back. I'll return. I promise. With those words, I took my first step into the forest. The moment I crossed the tree line, the whispers began, soft and enticing. They spoke of power, of knowledge, of secrets long buried. I gritted my teeth, focusing on Sarah's face, on the village I was fighting to save. As I pushed deeper into the woods, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. The trees seemed to close in around me, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. In the distance, I thought I saw shapes moving in the shadows, but when I turned to look, there was nothing there. I don't know how long I walked, the forest seeming to shift and change around me. Then suddenly, I stumbled into a clearing. In its center stood an enormous oak tree, its trunk twisted and knotted, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. As I approached the tree, the whispers reached a fever pitch. I fell to my knees, clutching my head, trying to block out the cacophony of voices. Through the haze of noise, I heard footsteps approaching. I looked up to see familiar faces emerging from the trees. Jack, Thomas, Harold, and others from the village surrounded me, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Welcome, Leif. They spoke in unison. their voices overlapping in an unsettling chorus. "We've been waiting for you." As they closed in, I realized with growing horror that my journey into the heart of the forest had only just begun, and the true test of my resolve was yet to come. My heart pounded in my chest as I faced the circle of familiar yet alien faces. Their eyes glowed with an eerie light, and their expressions were an unsettling mixture of serenity and hunger. "Jack," I said, focusing on my best friend's face. "Jack, it's me, Leif. Don't you recognize me?" Jack's head tilted slightly, a parody of curiosity crossing his features. When he spoke, his voice was layered with others, as if multiple people were speaking through him at once. "We recognize you, Leif. We've been waiting for you to join us." I scrambled to my feet, backing away slowly. "This isn't you, Jack. None of you. You have to fight this." Thomas, the blacksmith, stepped forward. His usually kind face was twisted into a predatory grin. "Why fight, Leif? The forest offers peace, power, knowledge. All you have to do is listen." As if on cue, the whispers intensified. They echoed through the clearing, bouncing off the trees, reverberating in my skull. Promises of untold power, of secrets of the universe, of eternal life. They all swirled around me, tempting, alluring. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to focus on Sarah's face, on Martha's warnings. "No," I growled. "I won't listen. I won't join you." The changed villagers hissed in unison, their glowing eyes narrowing. Harold, Sarah's father, spoke next. "If you won't join willingly, we'll have to persuade you." They began to advance, their movements unnaturally fluid. I backed away, my hand grasping for the axe at my belt. "Please," I begged, "don't make me hurt you." But my pleas fell on deaf ears. Jack lunged first, his speed inhuman. I barely managed to dodge, feeling the wind of his passage ruffle my hair. Thomas was next, his blacksmith's strength making the ground shake as he charged. I swung my axe, not to harm but to ward them off. "Stay back," I shouted, desperation creeping into my voice. For a moment it seemed to work. They paused, eyeing the axe warily. But then, as one, they attacked. The next few minutes were a blur of motion and fear. I fought with everything I had, using the axe to parry blows and create space. But they were too many, too strong, too fast. A glancing blow from Thomas sent me sprawling, the axe flying from my grip. As they closed in, triumph gleaming in their glowing eyes, I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. I sprinted deeper into the forest, branches whipping at my face, roots threatening to trip me at every step. Behind me I could hear them giving chase, their eerie, multi-layered voices calling out to me. "You can't run forever, Leif. The forest will have you. Join us. Be one with us." I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like lead. Just when I thought I couldn't take another step, I burst through a thick cluster of bushes and found myself in another clearing. In the center stood the largest, most ancient oak tree I had ever seen. Its trunk was gnarled and twisted, easily as wide as 3 men standing shoulder to shoulder. The bark seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and the leaves whispered with 1,000 voices, even though there was no wind. I approached the tree, drawn by a power I couldn't explain. As I got closer, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They weren't just noise anymore. They were words, sentences, stories. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The tree's response came not in words but in images that flashed through my mind. I saw the forest as it was, centuries ago, teeming with spirits and magic. I saw a dark entity, hungry and cruel, devouring the essence of other spirits. I saw humans, my ancestors, trapping the entity within this very tree, binding it with powerful magic. "You're the spirit," I breathed, realization dawning, the one Martha spoke of. The tree's leaves rustled in response, and I felt a wave of anger and frustration wash over me. The spirit was trapped, had been for centuries, and it wanted out. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Why call to the villagers?" More images flooded my mind. the spirit feeding on the essence of those who answered its call, growing stronger with each soul it consumed. It needed more power to break free of its prison, and it was using the villagers to achieve that goal. I staggered back, horrified by the spirit's callous disregard for human life. "I won't let you do this," I declared. "I'll find a way to stop you." The tree's aura pulsed angrily, and suddenly, the voices of the changed villagers rang out behind me. "You're too late, Leaf," Jack said, emerging from the trees with the others. "The spirit grows stronger every day. Soon it will be free, and we will be one with it forever." I spun around, finding myself once again surrounded, but this time I stood my ground. "You're wrong, Jack. This isn't the way. The spirit is using you, consuming you. This isn't the peace or power you were promised. It's destruction." For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of doubt in Jack's glowing eyes, but it was quickly replaced by that eerie serenity. "You don't understand, Leif," Thomas said, "but you will. Once you join us, you'll see the truth." They began to close in again, but this time I was ready. I dodged Jack's lunge, using his momentum to throw him into Thomas. I ducked under Harold's grasp, rolling away from the group. "I'm sorry," I said, truly meaning it. "But I can't let this continue." With that, I turned and ran again, this time with purpose. I had to get back to the village, to Martha. Now that I knew what we were facing, maybe we could find a way to stop it. As I ran, the forest seemed to come alive around me. Roots rose to trip me. Branches swung down to block my path. The spirit was trying to stop me, but I pressed on, driven by determination and the faces of those I was fighting to save. I don't know how long I ran or how I found my way, but suddenly, I burst out of the tree line and into the familiar surroundings of whispering pines. I stumbled towards Martha's cottage, my legs finally giving out as I reached her door. As darkness crept into the edges of my vision, I saw the door open and Martha's concerned face appear above me. "Leif, what happened? What did you see?" With the last of my strength, I managed to gasp out a few words before unconsciousness claimed me. "The tree, the spirit, we have to stop it." As I slipped into darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that our fight against the Whispering Forest had only just begun, and that the fate of Whispering Pines, and perhaps the world, hung in the balance. I awoke to the sound of hushed voices and the scent of herbs. My body ached, and my head throbbed with each beat of my heart. Slowly, I opened my eyes to find myself lying on a cot in Martha's cottage. The village elder sat nearby, deep in conversation with Sarah. "He's awake," Sarah exclaimed, rushing to my side. Her cool hand pressed against my forehead, and her green eyes searched my face with concern. "Leif, how are you feeling?" I tried to sit up, wincing at the pain that shot through my muscles. "Like I've been trampled by a herd of wild horses," I groaned. "How long was I out?" "Nearly 2 days," Martha answered, approaching with a steaming mug. "Drink this. It will help with the pain and clear your mind." I took the mug, the bitter herbal scent making my nose wrinkle. But I drank it down, trusting Martha's wisdom. Almost immediately I felt a warmth spread through my body, easing the aches. "Now," Martha said, settling into a chair beside the cot, "tell us what happened in the forest." Sarah held my hand as I recounted my harrowing experience, the chase through the woods, the encounter with our changed friends, and finally the ancient oak tree that housed the malevolent spirit. "An enchanted oak," Martha mused, her brow furrowed in thought. "I've heard legends of such trees, but I never thought—" She trailed off, lost in contemplation. "Martha," I said, my voice urgent, "what do you know about this spirit? How can we stop it?" The old woman sighed heavily, suddenly looking every one of her many years. "There's an old tale passed down through generations. It speaks of a dark entity that once roamed these lands, feeding on the life force of both spirits and humans alike. Our ancestors, with great sacrifice, managed to trap it within a mighty oak tree." "But how?" Sarah asked, her grip on my hand tightening. And why is it able to reach out now after all this time? Martha shook her head. The specifics of the binding ritual have been lost to time. As for why it's awakening now, I fear the seal may be weakening. Each person who succumbs to the whispers feeds the spirit, making it stronger. A chill ran down my spine as I remembered the hungry, otherworldly presence I'd felt emanating from the oak. We have to find a way to strengthen the seal, I said, attempting to stand. My legs wobbled, and Sarah quickly steadied me. Easy there, hero, she said, a hint of her usual teasing tone breaking through her worry. You're not going anywhere just yet. Sarah's right, Martha agreed. You need to regain your strength. In the meantime, I'll consult my old texts. Perhaps I can find some clue about the binding ritual. Reluctantly, I allowed Sarah to help me back onto the cot. As I settled in, a thought struck me. Sarah, your father, is there any news? Sarah's face fell, and she shook her head. No, he hasn't returned. None of them have. I reached out, pulling her into a comforting embrace. We'll find a way to save them, Sarah. I promise. As night fell, Martha retired to her study to pore over ancient tomes, while Sarah insisted on staying by my side. We talked in low voices, sharing our fears and hopes, drawing strength from each other's presence. It was in the quiet hours before dawn that I first heard it. A faint whisper, barely audible but unmistakable. I sat up abruptly, startling Sarah, who had been dozing in her chair. Leif? What's wrong? She asked, instantly alert. I held up a hand, straining my ears. There it was again, a whisper calling my name, promising power and knowledge beyond my wildest dreams. The whispers, I said, my voice tight with fear and anger. I can hear them, Sarah, even here in the village. Sarah's eyes widened in alarm. But how? We're so far from the forest. The spirit's growing stronger. Martha's voice came from the doorway. The old woman looked haggard, dark circles under her eyes testament to her sleepless night of research. Its influence is spreading. I swung my legs over the side of the cot, determined to stand. This time my legs held. We're running out of time, I said. Martha, did you find anything that could help? Martha nodded slowly. Perhaps. There's mention of a ritual that might allow us to communicate directly with the spirit. It's dangerous, but it might give us the information we need to strengthen the seal. Then we have to try, I insisted. What do we need for this ritual? As Martha listed the required ingredients, rare herbs, blessed water from the village well, and a personal item from someone taken by the spirit, I could see the worry etched on Sarah's face. Leif, she said, her voice quavering slightly. I don't like this. What if the spirit tries to possess you during the ritual? I took her hands in mine, meeting her gaze steadily. It's a risk we have to take, Sarah. If we do nothing, we'll lose everyone to the spirit's influence. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I know. I can't bear the thought of losing you too. I pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. You won't lose me. I'll always find my way back to you. As the sun rose, casting long shadows across the village, we set about gathering the necessary components for the ritual. The whispers grew stronger with each passing hour, and I could see the strain on the faces of the villagers as they fought against the spirit's call. By midday, we had everything we needed. Martha drew a complex series of symbols on the floor of her cottage, placing candles at strategic points. In the center, she set a bowl of blessed water and the herbs. Are you ready? She asked me, her voice grave. I nodded, clutching the pendant I'd borrowed from Sarah, a gift from her father. I'm ready. As Martha began to chant in a language I didn't recognize, the air in the cottage grew thick and heavy. The candles flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I felt a presence building around us, ancient and powerful. Suddenly, the whispers exploded into a cacophony of voices, all calling my name, all promising everything I'd ever desired. I gritted my teeth, focusing on Sarah's face, on the village I was fighting to save. Then, without warning, everything went silent. I opened eyes I hadn't realized I'd closed to find myself in a vast, misty plain. Before me stood a figure, shimmering and indistinct, but radiating malevolence. Leif, it spoke, its voice a chorus of thousands. We meet at last. As I stared into the spirit's shifting form, I knew that the true test of my resolve was about to begin. The fate of Whispering Pines hung in the balance, and I was the only one who could tip the scales. The misty plain stretched endlessly in all directions, an ethereal landscape that seemed to shift and change with each passing moment. The figure before me pulsed with an otherworldly energy, its form never quite settling into a definite shape. It was as if I was looking at 1,000 different beings all occupying the same space. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice sounding strange and distant in this realm. The figure's laugh was like the rustling of dead leaves. "I am many things, Leif. I am the whisper in the dark, the promise of power, the keeper of ancient knowledge. But you may call me Nyx." I steeled myself, remembering Martha's warnings. "Why are you doing this, Nyx? Why are you taking our people?" Nyx's form shimmered, and for a moment, I saw flashes of faces within it. Jack, Thomas, Sarah's father, and countless others I didn't recognize. "Taking? Oh, Leif, you misunderstand. I'm not taking them, I'm freeing them, showing them the truth of existence." "You're consuming them," I countered, anger rising in my chest. "Using them to grow stronger." The spirit's laughter echoed across the plain. "Growth requires sustenance, dear Leif. Your people provide that sustenance willingly. They come to me drawn by the promise of knowledge and power. Who am I to deny them?" I clenched my fists, fighting against the allure in Nyx's words. "You're twisting the truth. You're trapped, and you're using them to break free." Nyx's form pulsed angrily, the mist around us darkening. "Trapped. Yes, trapped by your ancestors, bound to that wretched tree for centuries. Do you know what it's like, Leif? To be confined, to be denied your true nature?" Images flashed through my mind, centuries of solitude, of hunger, of rage. I staggered under the onslaught, nearly falling to my knees. "Stop!" I gasped. "Get out of my head!" The assault ceased, and I looked up to see Nyx's form had solidified somewhat, taking on a vaguely humanoid shape. "You seek to strengthen the seal, to bind me once more," the spirit said, its voice now a silky whisper. "But why fight the inevitable, Leif? Join me instead. With your strength, your connection to the village, we could accomplish so much." I felt a pull, an almost irresistible urge to agree. Visions of power, of knowledge beyond imagining, danced before my eyes. For a moment I wavered, then unbidden Sarah's face flashed in my mind. I remembered her tears, her fear, her unwavering support. I thought of the village, of the people counting on me. "No," I said, my voice growing stronger. "I won't join you, Nyx. I won't let you destroy everything I love." Nyx's form shimmered with rage. "Fool! You could have had everything." The misty plain began to dissolve around us, the spirit's anger causing the ethereal realm to destabilize. As everything faded to white, I heard Nyx's final chilling words. "If you will not join me willingly, Leif, then I will take what I need by force." I gasped, my eyes flying open as I returned to my body. I was back in Martha's cottage, lying in the center of the ritual circle. Sarah and Martha hovered over me, their faces etched with concern. "Leif!" Sarah cried, helping me sit up. "Are you all right? What happened?" I shook my head, trying to clear the lingering fog from my mind. I spoke with the spirit. It calls itself Nyx. It's angry, and it's getting stronger." Martha nodded gravely. "We could feel its presence growing during the ritual. Did you learn anything about how to strengthen the seal?" Before I could answer, a commotion outside caught our attention. We rushed to the window to see villagers running towards the square, their faces pale with fear. "What's going on?" I asked, already moving towards the door. We followed the crowd to the village square, where a sight that chilled my blood awaited us. Sarah gasped beside me, her hand flying to her mouth. There, in the center of the square, stood Sarah's father, Harold. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, emerging from the tree line, came dozens of villagers, all those who had been taken by the whispers. Their eyes glowed with an unearthly light, and their movements were unnaturally fluid. Harold stepped forward, his voice carrying an echo of thousands. "People of Whispering Pines," he announced, "the time has come to embrace your true destiny. The forest calls. Nyx calls. Join us, and no power beyond your wildest dreams." Murmurs of fear and confusion rippled through the crowd. I saw some villagers step forward, drawn by Harold's words and the allure of the whispers that now filled the air. "No!" I shouted, pushing my way to the front. "Don't listen to them. It's a trick." Harold's glowing eyes fixed on me, a cruel smile twisting his usually kind face. "Ah, Leif. Our master warned us you might interfere. But surely even you can see the futility of resistance now." I stood my ground, facing down the man who had been like a second father to me. "Harold, I know you're in there somewhere. Fight this. Remember who you are." For a moment I thought I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by that eerie, otherworldly glow. "Harold is gone," the thing wearing his face said. "There is only Nyx now." With a gesture from Harold, the changed villagers began to advance. Panic erupted as people began to flee, screaming and pushing in their haste to escape. "Sarah! Martha!" I called out, searching for them in the chaos. I spotted them helping an elderly couple to safety and rushed to join them. "We need to get everyone to safety," I said, my mind racing. "The town hall. We can barricade ourselves in there." Martha nodded. "Go. Get as many people there as you can. I'll gather what supplies I can from my cottage." As Martha hurried off, Sarah grabbed my arm. "Leif, what about my father? We can't just leave him." I looked back at Harold, still standing in the square, calmly watching the panic he had caused. "We'll find a way to save him, Sarah. I promise. But right now, we need to protect those we can." Tears streamed down Sarah's face, but she nodded resolutely. Together, we began herding people towards the town hall, all the while dodging the grasping hands of the changed villagers. As we worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Nyx had made its move, bringing the battle out of the forest and into our village. The true test of our resolve was yet to come, and I feared the cost of victory might be higher than we could bear. With one last look at the chaos in the square, I helped Sarah usher the last group of villagers into the town hall. As we barricaded the doors, I silently vowed to find a way to end this, to save our people, and to stop Nyx once and for all. The siege of Whispering Pines had begun, and the fate of our village, perhaps the world, hung in the balance. The town hall buzzed with fear and confusion. Families huddled together, children whimpered, and hushed conversations filled the air. I stood by the barricaded door with Sarah, peering out through a small gap. Outside, the changed villagers prowled the streets, their eerie, glowing eyes searching for any sign of movement. "How long can we stay here?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. I squeezed her hand reassuringly. "As long as we need to. We're safe for now." But even as I said the words, doubt gnawed at me. How long could we truly hold out? We had limited supplies, and Nyx's influence seemed to be growing stronger by the hour. Martha approached us, her face grim. "Leif, we need to talk strategy. This isn't a permanent solution." I nodded, following her to a quieter corner of the hall. Sarah trailed behind us, her face set with determination. "The changed are growing in number," Martha said in a low voice. "I've been watching. Every hour more villagers succumb to the whispers and join them." My heart sank. There has to be a way to stop this, to free them from Nyx's control. Martha's eyes flickered with a mix of hope and resignation. There might be. In my research, I found mentions of an ancient artifact, a crystal that was used in the original binding ritual. If we could find it, we might be able to strengthen the seal and break Nyx's hold on the villagers. That's great news, Sarah exclaimed a bit too loudly. A few nearby villagers looked our way, and she lowered her voice. Where is this crystal? Martha's expression darkened. That's the problem. If it still exists, it would be in the heart of the forest, near the enchanted oak. The implications hit me like a physical blow. We'd have to go back into the forest, right into Nyx's domain. Sarah gripped my arm tightly. Leif, no, it's too dangerous. There has to be another way. I looked at her, seeing the fear in her eyes, but also the strength behind it. Sarah, you know there isn't. If we don't do something, we'll lose everyone. Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded, understanding the gravity of our situation. I'll go, I said, turning back to Martha. Tell me everything you know about this crystal. As Martha began to explain, a commotion near the door caught our attention. To my shock, I saw Jack, my best friend, who I thought had been lost to Nyx, stumbling through a gap in the barricade. Jack, I called out, rushing to him. He looked terrible, pale, disheveled, his eyes wild but no longer glowing with that otherworldly light. Leif, he gasped, collapsing into my arms. I broke free. I don't know how, but I fought it. I fought Nyx. A surge of hope rushed through me. If Jack could break free, maybe there was hope for the others too. We helped Jack to a makeshift bed, and I knelt beside him as Sarah brought him water. Jack, what happened? How did you escape? Jack took a shaky sip of water before speaking. It was like being trapped in a nightmare. I could see everything happening, but I couldn't control my actions. But then, I heard your voice, Leif. When you confronted Harold in the square, it gave me strength to fight back. My mind raced with the implications. So there is a way to break Nyx's control. We just need to find it. Jack nodded weakly. But we don't have much time. Nyx is planning something big. The Changed. They're gathering materials, preparing for some kind of ritual. I think Nyx is trying to break free completely. Martha's sharp intake of breath told me how serious this was. If Nyx breaks free from the oak, there will be no stopping it, she said gravely. I stood up, a plan forming in my mind. Then we need to act now. Jack, do you think you're strong enough to guide us to where this ritual is taking place? Jack struggled to sit up. I think so. But Leif, it's incredibly dangerous. The forest is crawling with the Changed, and Nyx's power is strongest there. We don't have a choice, I said firmly. Martha, tell me more about this crystal. What does it look like? How do we use it? As Martha described the artifact, a fist-sized, multifaceted crystal that glowed with an inner light, I began to gather supplies. Sarah helped, her movements quick and determined despite the fear I could see in her eyes. I'm coming with you, she said, in a tone that brooked no argument. I wanted to protest, to keep her safe, but I knew I'd need all the help I could get. All right, I agreed. But you have to promise to be careful. She managed a small smile. Only if you do the same. As we prepared to leave, Martha pulled me aside one last time. Leif, there's something else you should know. The crystal. Using it comes at a price. The original binding required a sacrifice. It may demand the same again. The weight of her words settled heavily on my shoulders. What kind of sacrifice? Martha's eyes were sad. A life freely given, a soul to bind the spirit. I swallowed hard, the implications clear. I understand. With our supplies gathered and Jack leaning on me for support, we prepared to slip out of the town hall. But as we approached the barricaded door, a voice called out behind us. Where do you think you're going? I turned to see Thomas, the blacksmith, his massive frame blocking our path. Other villagers began to gather around, their faces a mix of fear and anger. We're going to stop this, I explained. We've found a way to defeat Nyx and free our people. Thomas's eyes narrowed. By running back to the forest? How do we know you're not under its influence? How do we know this isn't a trap? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. I could see doubt and suspicion growing in their eyes. Please. Sarah stepped forward, her voice strong despite the tremor I could hear in it. You know us. You know Leaf. We're trying to save everyone. For a moment, it seemed like Sarah's words had gotten through. But then, to my horror, Jack straightened up beside me, a cruel smile twisting his features. Oh, Leif, he said, his voice once again layered with that otherworldly echo. You always were too trusting. Before I could react, Jack's hand shot out, gripping my throat with inhuman strength. Nyx sends its regards, he hissed. As darkness crept into the edges of my vision, I heard Sarah's scream and the panicked shouts of the villagers. My last thought before unconsciousness took me was one of bitter realization. We had been betrayed, and I had led us right into Nyx's trap. The battle for Whispering Pines had taken a dark turn, and I feared that my mistake might cost us everything we were fighting to protect. Consciousness returned slowly, accompanied by a throbbing pain in my head and a raw feeling in my throat. I blinked, trying to focus in the dim light. As my vision cleared, I realized I was in the root cellar beneath the town hall, my hands bound behind my back. Leaf, are you awake? Sarah's whisper came from nearby. I turned my head to see her tied up beside me, her face streaked with dirt and tears. Sarah, I croaked, my voice hoarse. Are you okay? What happened? After Nyx attacked you, everything descended into chaos, she explained, her voice trembling. Thomas and some of the others overpowered us. They think we're working with Nyx now. The memory of Jack's betrayal hit me like a physical blow. I had led us right into a trap, and now we were paying the price. How long have we been down here? A few hours, I think. It's hard to tell. I tugged at my bonds, but they held fast. We need to get out of here. Every minute we waste gives Nyx more time to complete that ritual. Sarah nodded, determination replacing the fear in her eyes. I've been working on loosening the ropes. I think I can... She was interrupted by the sound of the cellar door creaking open. We both fell silent as footsteps approached. Martha's face appeared in the gloom, her expression a mix of concern and disappointment. Oh, Leif, she sighed. How could you let this happen? Martha, please, I pleaded. This is all a misunderstanding. We're not working with Nyx. Jack betrayed us. He's still under Nyx's control. The old woman studied us for a long moment, her eyes searching our faces. Finally, she nodded. I believe you. But the others? They're scared, Leif. Fear makes people do foolish things. Then help us, Sarah urged. Untie us. We need to stop Nyx before it's too late. Martha hesitated, glancing back towards the cellar door. If I do this, there's no going back. The village will see it as a betrayal. I met her gaze steadily. Sometimes doing the right thing means standing alone. You taught me that, Martha. A small smile tugged at her lips. So I did. She moved behind us, working to undo our bonds. I've brought supplies, food, water, and some herbs that might help protect your minds from Nyx's influence. They're in a pack by the door. As the ropes fell away, I rubbed my wrists, wincing at the raw skin. Thank you, Martha. But what about you? Won't you come with us? She shook her head. I need to stay here. Try to talk sense into the others. Someone needs to prepare the village for what's coming, whether we succeed or fail. Sarah hugged the old woman tightly. Be careful, Martha. You too, my dears, Martha replied, her voice thick with emotion. Now go, quickly. There's a tunnel at the back of the cellar that leads to the edge of the forest. It hasn't been used in years, but it should still be passable. We gathered the supplies and made our way to the back of the cellar. Sure enough, hidden behind some old crates was a narrow passageway. Remember, Martha called softly as we prepared to enter the tunnel. The crystal is your key to binding Nyx. But be warned, its power comes at a price. I nodded, the weight of her earlier words about sacrifice heavy in my mind. We understand. Thank you for everything, Martha. With one last look back, Sarah and I plunged into the darkness of the tunnel. It was a tight fit, the air thick with dust and the musty smell of disuse. We moved as quickly as we dared, aware that every second counted. After what felt like hours but was probably only about 20 minutes, we emerged into the cool night air at the forest's edge. The trees loomed before us, their shadows seeming to writhe in the moonlight. "Are you ready for this?" I asked Sarah, taking her hand. She squeezed my fingers, her voice steady despite the fear I could see in her eyes. "As ready as I'll ever be. Let's go save our home." We had barely taken a dozen steps into the forest when the whispers started, soft at first, then growing in intensity. They promised power, knowledge, freedom from fear and pain. I gritted my teeth, focusing on the warmth of Sarah's hand in mine. "Don't listen," I muttered. "Keep moving." As we pressed deeper into the woods, the air grew thick and heavy, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. The trees seemed to bend towards us, their branches reaching out like grasping fingers. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from behind a gnarled oak. My heart leapt to my throat as I recognized Jack, his eyes glowing with that eerie light. "Welcome back," he said, his voice echoing unnaturally. "Nyx has been expecting you." Sarah tensed beside me. "Jack, please, fight this. We know you're still in there somewhere." Jack's face twisted into a cruel smile. "Jack is gone. There's only Nyx now." More figures emerged from the shadows. Harold, Thomas, and others from the village, all with that same otherworldly glow in their eyes. We were surrounded. "The ritual nears completion," Jack continued. "Soon Nyx will be free and this world will be remade in its image. Join us, Leif. Sarah, take your rightful place at Nyx's side." For a moment the whispers crescendoed, their promises almost overwhelming. I saw Sarah waver, her eyes glazing over slightly. "Sarah," I said urgently, squeezing her hand. "Remember why we're here. Remember your father, your home. We can still save them." She blinked, shaking her head as if to clear it. "You're right. We can't give up now." I turned back to Jack, standing tall despite the fear coursing through me. "We'll never join you. We're here to stop Nyx, to free our people." Jack's expression hardened. "Then you will die here, lost in the darkness of the forest." As one, the changed villagers began to advance. Sarah and I backed away, our eyes darting around for any chance of escape. My hand closed around a sturdy branch on the ground. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. "Sarah," I whispered, "when I say run, head for the old oak. That's where the ritual must be happening. It's our only chance." She nodded, her body tense and ready to sprint. The changed were almost upon us, their hands reaching out to grab us. I took a deep breath, knowing that what happened in the next few moments would determine not just our fate, but the fate of Whispering Pines, and perhaps the entire world. "Now," I shouted, swinging the branch in a wide arc to create an opening. "Run!" We burst through the line of changed villagers, their inhuman shrieks filling the air behind us. As we raced deeper into the forest, the whispers rose to a deafening roar, and the trees themselves seemed to come alive, their branches whipping at us as we passed. The chase was on, and the final confrontation with Nyx lay ahead. With Sarah at my side, and the weight of our mission heavy on my shoulders, I ran towards what I knew would be the fight of our lives. We crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping at our faces and roots threatening to trip us at every step. The shrieks of the changed villagers echoed behind us, spurring us on despite our burning lungs and aching muscles. "There," Sarah gasped, pointing ahead. Through the trees, I could see a faint glow emanating from a clearing. At its center stood the ancient oak, its massive trunk twisted and gnarled, pulsing with an otherworldly light. As we approached, the air grew thick and heavy, charged with malevolent energy. We burst into the clearing, skidding to a stop at the edge of an intricate pattern carved into the earth. Symbols I didn't recognize glowed with an eerie blue light, forming a complex, circular design around the base of the oak. "Leif," Sarah whispered, her voice tight with fear. Look. Following her gaze, I saw figures standing at key points around the circle. With a jolt of recognition, I realized they were the first villagers to disappear, including Sarah's father, Harold. Their eyes were closed, bodies rigid, as if in a trance. At the foot of the oak tree lay an ornate stone altar, and upon it, the crystal, I breathed. It was just as Martha had described, a fist-sized, multifaceted crystal that pulsed with an inner light. Even from this distance I could feel its power, a counterpoint to the malevolent energy of Nyx. Before we could move, a voice rang out, stopping us in our tracks. Ah, the heroes arrive at last. From behind the great oak stepped a figure that made my blood run cold. It was Jack, but not Jack. His body seemed to ripple and shift, as if struggling to contain something far greater than itself. When he spoke, it was with a voice of multitudes. Nyx, I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. The thing wearing Jack's face smiled, the expression cold and cruel. In the flesh, so to speak. I must thank you, Leif. Your friend here makes an excellent vessel. So much potential, so much delicious anguish. Sarah stepped forward, her fists clenched. Let him go. Let them all go. Nyx laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Oh, my dear, they don't want to be let go. They've seen the truth, tasted true power. Why would they ever want to return to their small, insignificant lives? I placed a hand on Sarah's arm, holding her back. What's your endgame here, Nyx? Why go through all this? The spirit's eyes flashed with an ancient hunger. Freedom, Leif. For too long I've been bound to this wretched tree, forced to exist in the shadows. But no more. With this ritual, I will break free of my prison and take my rightful place as ruler of this realm. We won't let that happen, I said, trying to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. Nyx's smile widened, showing too many teeth. You don't have a choice. The ritual is nearly complete. In moments, the barrier between worlds will weaken, and I will be free to cross over fully. This vessel, it gestured to Jack's body, is but a temporary measure. Soon I will have a form of my own, and this world will tremble before me. As if on cue, the symbols on the ground flared brighter. The air crackled with energy, and a low humming filled the clearing. The entranced villagers began to chant in a language I didn't recognize, their voices blending into an otherworldly chorus. We have to stop the ritual, I said to Sarah, my mind racing. The crystal, it's the key. If we can get to it. A valiant effort, Nyx interrupted. But futile. You're outnumbered and outmatched. Why continue this pointless struggle? Join me instead. With your connections to this world, you could be powerful beyond imagining. For a moment, I felt the pull of Nyx's words. Visions flashed through my mind. Power, knowledge, the ability to reshape reality itself. It was intoxicating, overwhelming. Leif. Sarah's voice cut through the haze, her hand gripping mine tightly. Don't listen to it. Remember who you are, what we're fighting for. I blinked, the visions fading. Right, I said, shaking my head to clear it. Thanks, Sarah. Nyx's expression darkened. Disappointing but not unexpected. If you won't join willingly, then you'll serve as sacrifices to fuel my ascension. With a gesture from Nyx, the changed villagers who had been pursuing us burst into the clearing. They moved to surround us, their glowing eyes fixed on us with predatory intensity. Any ideas? Sarah asked, her back pressed against mine as we faced the encroaching threat. I scanned the clearing desperately, looking for any advantage. My eyes fell on the crystal, still pulsing on the altar. We need to get to that crystal. It's our only chance. Easier said than done, Sarah muttered. As the changed closed in, I made a split-second decision. Sarah, when I say now, run for the crystal. I'll hold them off as long as I can. What? No, I'm not leaving you. Sarah, please. One of us needs to make it. You're faster than me. It has to be you. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. Okay, but you better not die on me, Leaf. I'll never forgive you if you do. Despite everything, I managed a small smile. I'll do my best. The changed were almost upon us now. I tensed, ready to spring into action. Now, Sarah, go. As Sarah sprinted towards the altar, I charged in the opposite direction, tackling the nearest changed villager. We went down in a tangle of limbs, and I fought with everything I had, trying to buy Sarah as much time as possible. All around me was chaos. The chanting grew louder, the symbols on the ground blazing like fire. The air itself seemed to ripple and distort, as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. Through it all, I caught glimpses of Sarah's progress. She dodged and weaved through the changed, her path taking her ever closer to the altar. But Nyx, still wearing Jack's face, was moving to intercept her. I redoubled my efforts, fighting my way free of the changed only to be grabbed by more. "Sarah!" I yelled. "Hurry!" She was almost there, her hand reaching out for the crystal. But Nyx was faster, its inhuman speed carrying it to the altar in a blur of motion. It grabbed Sarah's wrist, yanking her away from the crystal. "Foolish girl," Nyx snarled. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" I watched in horror as Nyx lifted Sarah off the ground, its grip on her throat tightening. She struggled, her feet kicking uselessly in the air. "No!" I roared, summoning strength I didn't know I possessed. I broke free of the changed holding me, charging towards Nyx and Sarah. Nyx turned, its eyes blazing with otherworldly power. "Enough of this," it growled. With a gesture, an invisible force slammed into me, sending me flying backwards. I hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from my lungs. As I struggled to my feet, I saw Nyx turn its attention back to Sarah. "You've been a thorn in my side for too long," it said, its voice cold and merciless. "It's time to end this." Sarah's eyes met mine, wide with fear but also filled with a fierce determination. In that moment, I knew what she was about to do. With the last of her strength, Sarah reached out, not for the crystal, but for the altar itself. Her fingers closed around the edge, and with a supreme effort she toppled it over. The crystal fell, hitting the ground with a sound like a thunderclap. A blinding light erupted from it, washing over the clearing in a wave of pure energy. Nyx screamed, a sound of rage and pain that shook the very air. It released Sarah, staggering backwards as if struck. The changed villagers collapsed like puppets with their strings cut, and the symbols on the ground flickered and faded. I rushed to Sarah's side, helping her to her feet. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice hoarse with concern. She nodded, rubbing her throat. "I think so. Did it work?" Before I could answer, Nyx's voice rang out, filled with fury. "You insignificant insects! Do you think this changes anything? I am eternal, all-powerful. I will not be denied." The spirit's form was fluctuating wildly now, Jack's features melting and reforming in a nightmarish display. It advanced on us, raw power crackling around it. "Sarah," I said urgently, "the crystal. We need to use it now." She nodded, understanding. Together we moved towards where the crystal lay, its light pulsing in time with the chaotic energies swirling around us. Nyx realized our intent a moment too late. "No!" it howled, lunging towards us. But we were closer. Our hands closed around the crystal simultaneously, and in that instant, I felt a surge of power unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Knowledge flooded my mind. The original binding ritual, the price it demanded, the choice that lay before us. I looked at Sarah, seeing in her eyes that she understood too. "Together?" I asked. She nodded, a sad smile on her face. "Together." As Nyx bore down upon us, we raised the crystal high, our voices joining in an ancient incantation. The words came unbidden, as if we'd known them all our lives. Light exploded from the crystal, enveloping Nyx in a cocoon of pure energy. The spirit thrashed and howled, its form unraveling as the power of the binding ritual took hold. I felt a pull, an inexorable draining sensation. The ritual demanded a price, a life freely given. But as Sarah and I held the crystal between us, something unexpected happened. Instead of taking one of us, the crystal seemed to draw equally from both, balancing the sacrifice between us. As Nyx's form collapsed in on itself, drawn back towards the ancient oak, I felt my strength fading. Beside me, Sarah swayed on her feet, but we held on, pouring everything we had into completing the ritual. With a final, earth-shaking roar, Nyx was pulled back into its prison. The crystal flared one last time, then went dark, its power spent. Sarah and I collapsed to the ground, barely conscious. Around us, the changed villagers were stirring, confusion and disorientation on their faces as Nyx's influence faded. "We did it," Sarah whispered, her voice weak but triumphant. I managed a tired smile, reaching out to take her hand. "We did. It's over." As darkness crept into the edges of my vision, I saw figures approaching, Martha leading a group of villagers from town. Help had arrived, though whether in time to save us I couldn't say. My last thought before unconsciousness took me was one of peace. Whatever happened now, we had saved our home, our people. Whispering Pines would endure, free from the shadow of Nyx. And Sarah and I? We had faced the darkness together, and in doing so, found a strength greater than either of us alone. Whatever the future held, I knew we would face it side by side. With that comforting thought, I let the darkness take me, Sarah's hand still clasped tightly in mine. Consciousness returned slowly, accompanied by the soft murmur of voices and the scent of herbs. I blinked, my vision gradually focusing on a familiar wooden ceiling. I was back in Martha's cottage. "He's awake," Sarah's voice, filled with relief, came from beside me. I turned my head to see her sitting by my bedside, her face pale but her green eyes bright. She looked exhausted but very much alive. "Sarah," I croaked, my throat dry. "You're okay." She smiled, reaching out to take my hand. "Thanks to you. We did it, Leaf. We really did it." Before I could respond, Martha appeared, carrying a steaming mug. "Welcome back to the land of the living," she said, her voice gruff but warm. "You two had us worried for a while there." As she helped me sit up and drink the herbal tea, my mind raced with questions. How long was I out? What happened after the ritual? Martha and Sarah exchanged glances. "You've been unconscious for 3 days," Martha said. "As for what happened, well, it's quite a tale." Sarah squeezed my hand. "When we collapsed after binding Nyx, Martha and some of the villagers found us. They brought us back here. For a while, it wasn't clear if we'd..." She trailed off, her voice catching. "But you pulled through," Martha finished. "Both of you. Though it was a close thing." I nodded, processing this information. "And the others? Jack, Sarah's father, all the changed villagers?" "They're recovering," Martha said. "The binding ritual broke Nyx's hold on them. Most are back to normal, though some are still struggling with the memories of what they did while under Nyx's influence." A wave of relief washed over me, quickly followed by concern. "And Nyx? Is it truly bound?" Martha's expression grew serious. "As far as we can tell, yes. The ancient oak stands silent now. No whispers, no strange lights. But Leif, Sarah, what you two did, it's unprecedented. The original binding required a full life sacrifice. Somehow you managed to split the cost between you." Sarah and I looked at each other, the weight of what we'd done settling over us. "What does that mean for us?" Sarah asked, her voice small. Martha shook her head. "I'm not entirely sure. You're both alive, which is more than we dared hope for. But there may be consequences. We'll have to wait and see." As if on cue, a sharp pain lanced through my head. I winced, bringing a hand to my temple. "Leaf?" Sarah asked, concern evident in her voice. "What's wrong?" "Just a headache," I said, trying to sound reassuring. But as the pain faded, I was left with a strange sensation like an echo in my mind that wasn't my own. I looked at Sarah and saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. She'd felt it too. Before we could discuss it further, there was a commotion outside. The door burst open and Jack stumbled in, his face a mask of anguish and remorse. "Leif, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I never meant to." "I couldn't stop it," he babbled, tears streaming down his face. Despite my lingering weakness, I managed to sit up straighter. "Jack, it's okay. It wasn't your fault. Nix was controlling you." Sarah nodded in agreement. "We don't blame you, Jack. We're just glad you're back." Jack collapsed into a nearby chair, his body shaking with sobs. "But I remember everything. The things I said, the things I did. How can you ever forgive me?" I exchanged a glance with Sarah, seeing my own thoughts reflected in her eyes. "There's nothing to forgive," I said firmly. "You were as much a victim as anyone." Martha placed a comforting hand on Jack's shoulder. "The road to recovery will be long for all of us, but we'll walk it together. That's what community means." As Jack's sobs quieted, more visitors began to arrive. Sarah's father, Harold, entered hesitantly, his eyes filled with a mixture of joy and guilt as they fell on his daughter. "Sarah," he breathed, moving to embrace her. "My brave, brilliant girl. Can you ever forgive your old fool of a father?" Sarah hugged him tightly, her own tears falling freely now. "Oh, Dad, I'm just so glad you're okay." As the cottage filled with more villagers, all eager to see us, to thank us, to seek forgiveness or offer support, I felt overwhelmed. The pain in my head returned, sharper this time, accompanied by flashes of emotion that didn't feel entirely my own. I caught Sarah's eye across the crowded room and saw her wince, one hand going to her temple. Whatever was happening, we were in it together. Martha, ever observant, noticed our discomfort. "All right, that's enough for now," she announced, her voice brooking no argument. "Our heroes need rest. There'll be time for more reunions later." As she ushered the villagers out, promising updates and organizing support for those still struggling, I felt a wave of gratitude for the old woman's strength and wisdom. Once the cottage was quiet again, Martha turned to us, her eyes sharp. "Now, what's really going on with you two?" Sarah and I exchanged glances. "We're not sure," I admitted. "There's this sensation. Like an echo in my mind, but it doesn't feel like it's coming from me." Sarah nodded. "I feel it too. And sometimes I swear I can sense what Leif is feeling, even when I'm not looking at him." Martha's brow furrowed in thought. "The split sacrifice," she mused. "It seems it's had some unexpected side effects. You two may have forged a connection deeper than we realized." "Is it dangerous?" I asked, trying to keep the worry from my voice. "I don't think so," Martha said slowly. "But it's uncharted territory. We'll need to monitor it closely." As if to demonstrate the point, another wave of sensation washed over me, a complex mix of fear, wonder, and something warmer, more intimate. I looked at Sarah and knew without a doubt that those feelings were hers. "This is a lot to process," Sarah said, her voice shaky. I reached out, taking her hand in mine. The contact seemed to stabilize the connection between us, the chaotic swirl of emotions settling into a comforting hum. "We'll figure it out together," I said, trying to project confidence I didn't entirely feel. "Just like we've faced everything else." Martha watched us with a mixture of concern and something that looked almost like pride. "You two have been through more than anyone should have to bear," she said softly. "But you've shown remarkable strength and courage. Whatever comes next, I have faith you'll face it with the same spirit." As the day wore on, we began to adjust to our new reality. The village was in recovery mode, with everyone pitching in to help those most affected by Nix's influence. Jack and Harold, along with the other formerly changed villagers, threw themselves into the work, as if trying to atone for actions that weren't truly their fault. Sarah and I, still weak from our ordeal, were under strict orders from Martha to rest. But as we lay in our beds talking quietly, we began to explore the strange new connection between us. "It's like I can feel the shape of your thoughts," Sarah said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Not the specifics, but the general impression." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "And sometimes, if I focus, I can almost see through your eyes. It's disorienting." We practiced, learning to differentiate between our own thoughts and emotions and those coming from the other. It was challenging, often overwhelming, but there was also something exhilarating about it. As night fell and the cottage grew quiet, Sarah's voice broke the silence. "Leif, are you afraid?" I considered the question, knowing she would sense any attempt at deception. "Yes," I admitted finally. "But not as much as I probably should be. As long as we're facing this together, I feel like we can handle anything." I felt a warm rush of affection through our connection, accompanied by Sarah's soft laugh. "You always were the optimistic one," she said fondly. "One of us has to be," I replied with a smile. We lapsed into comfortable silence, but I could sense Sarah's mind working, grappling with something. Finally, she spoke again. "Leif, what do you think this means for us? For our future?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. "I don't know exactly," I said slowly. "But Sarah, my feelings for you, they've always been more than just friendship. I think you know that. Even before this connection. If you don't feel the same way, I understand, but..." I was cut off by a sudden surge of emotion through our link. Joy, nervousness, and a deep, abiding love that took my breath away. "Oh, Leif," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "Of course I feel the same way. I think I always have." The rush of relief and happiness I felt was echoed back to me through our connection, creating a feedback loop of positive emotion that left us both giddy and breathless. As we drifted off to sleep that night, our minds intertwined in a way that defied normal human experience. I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead would be challenging, recovery for the village, learning to navigate our new connection, facing whatever consequences our split sacrifice might bring. But we would face it all together. Sarah and I, bound by something deeper than mere words could express, would stand as a beacon of hope for Whispering Pines. We had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, our love for each other and for our community forged in the crucible of our trials. As I teetered on the edge of sleep, I sent one last thought through our connection. "Whatever comes next, we're ready." Sarah's response came back, warm and sure. "Together." And with that comforting thought, we let sleep take us, our minds and hearts intertwined, ready to face whatever the future might hold. The weeks following our confrontation with Nix passed in a blur of recovery and adjustment. As Sarah and I regained our strength, we worked alongside the villagers to rebuild and heal. Our unique connection, while still overwhelming at times, became an integral part of our lives. One crisp autumn morning, about a month after the binding ritual, Sarah and I stood at the edge of the village, looking out towards the forest. The leaves were turning, painting the landscape in vibrant reds and golds. "It's hard to believe how peaceful it looks now," Sarah mused, her hand warm in mine. I nodded, feeling the echo of her emotions through our link, a mix of wonder and lingering apprehension. "It's beautiful, but I don't think I'll ever look at those woods the same way again." A gentle squeeze of my hand accompanied a wave of reassurance from Sarah. "We're stronger now. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." As if summoned by our conversation, Martha approached, her weathered face creased with a smile. "Good morning, you two. How are you feeling today?" "Better," I replied, matching her smile. "The headaches are less frequent now." Sarah nodded in agreement. "And we're getting better at managing the connection." Martha's eyes twinkled with a knowing look. "I'm glad to hear it. You two have become quite the topic of conversation in the village, you know." I felt a blush creep up my neck, matched by a flutter of embarrassment from Sarah. Our growing romantic relationship, combined with our unique mental link, had indeed made us the center of attention, not always comfortably so. Speaking of the village, Martha continued, her tone growing more serious. The council has been discussing the future. We'd like you both to join us for a meeting this afternoon. Sarah and I exchanged glances, a mix of curiosity and nervousness flowing between us. Of course, Sarah said. Is everything all right? Martha's expression was unreadable. There's much to discuss. The village is changing and we need to be prepared. As Martha walked away, I felt a spike of anxiety from Sarah. Hey, I said softly, turning to face her. Whatever it is, we'll handle it. Remember? She smiled, some of the tension easing from her shoulders. Together, she agreed. The rest of the morning passed quickly as we helped with various tasks around the village. The work was therapeutic, giving us a sense of purpose and helping to ground us when our shared emotions threatened to overwhelm. As afternoon approached, we made our way to the town hall. The main room had been set up for the council meeting, with the village elders, including Martha and Sarah's father, Harold, seated at a long table. Leaf, Sarah, please join us, Harold said, gesturing to 2 empty chairs. As we sat, I could feel the weight of everyone's gaze upon us. Through our link, I sensed Sarah's discomfort and sent a wave of calming energy her way. She glanced at me gratefully. Martha cleared her throat, beginning the meeting. As you all know, the events of the past month have changed our village profoundly. The threat of Nyx may be contained, but we cannot ignore the impact it has had on our community. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. I saw Jack shift uncomfortably in his seat, the guilt still evident on his face. Furthermore, Martha continued, we must consider the unique situation of Leaf and Sarah. Their actions saved us all, but the consequences of their shared sacrifice are still not fully understood. I felt a flutter of nervousness in my stomach, echoed by Sarah. What exactly was Martha getting at? Harold spoke up, his voice gentle but firm. Leaf, Sarah, we want you to know that you have the full support of this council and the entire village, but we also have a responsibility to ensure the safety and well-being of everyone. What exactly are you saying? Sarah asked, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her tone. Martha leaned forward, her eyes kind but serious. We believe it would be in everyone's best interest if you two were to leave the village for a time. The words hit like a physical blow. Leave? Leave our home, our families, everything we'd ever known? But why? I managed to ask, my voice hoarse with shock. It's not a punishment, Harold hastened to add. Far from it. But the truth is, we don't know the full extent of your new abilities, and there are those in the village who are uncomfortable with the idea of having such power in our midst. I felt a surge of anger from Sarah, matched by my own rising indignation. So you're exiling us? After everything we've done? Martha shook her head emphatically. No, not exiling. We're asking you to embark on a journey, to explore your connection, to learn more about the ancient magics you've tapped into. There's a wider world out there, with knowledge that could help us understand what's happened to you. And in doing so, another elder added, you'll be protecting the village. If there are any unforeseen consequences of your sacrifice, it's better they manifest away from here. The room fell silent as Sarah and I absorbed this information. Through our link, I could feel her whirlwind of emotions, hurt, anger, fear, but also a tiny spark of excitement at the prospect of exploring the unknown. How long? Sarah asked finally, her voice quiet but steady. The elders exchanged glances. We can't say for certain, Martha replied. A year, perhaps, maybe more, until you feel you've gained control and understanding of your abilities. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. And if we refuse? Harold's face fell, pain evident in his eyes. You wouldn't be forced to leave, but it might become difficult for you here. People are scared. even if they don't want to admit it. This way you have a chance to return as heroes, with knowledge that could benefit us all. The meeting continued with discussions of provisions, possible destinations, and means of communication, but I found it hard to focus, my mind reeling from the enormity of what was being asked of us. As we left the town hall hours later, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the village square. Sarah and I walked in silence, our hands intertwined, our emotions too tangled to put into words. Finally, as we reached the edge of the village, Sarah spoke. "What do you think we should do?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know. Part of me wants to refuse, to stay and prove that we're not a threat. But another part is curious," Sarah finished, echoing my own conflicted feelings, "about what we might discover out there." We stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the darkening forest. Then, almost simultaneously, we turned to face each other. "Whatever we decide," I said firmly, "we decide together. I won't go anywhere without you, Sarah." She smiled, a wave of love and affection washing over me through our link. "Nor I without you, Leif." As we made our way back to the village, a plan began to form in our minds. We would accept the council's proposal, but on our own terms. We would explore, learn, and grow, not just for ourselves, but for the good of Whispering Pines and perhaps the world beyond. The next few days were a flurry of activity as we prepared for our journey. Maps were consulted, supplies gathered, and tearful goodbyes exchanged. Through it all, Sarah and I drew strength from each other, our connection a constant reminder that we would never truly be alone. On the morning of our departure, the entire village gathered to see us off. Martha approached, pressing a small, leather-bound book into my hands. "A journal," she explained, "to record your discoveries, and perhaps to begin writing your own story." I nodded, touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Martha, for everything." As we shouldered our packs and turned to face the road leading away from Whispering Pines, I felt a mixture of trepidation and excitement. The future was uncertain, full of potential dangers but also incredible possibilities. "Ready?" Sarah asked, her hand finding mine. I squeezed her fingers, sending a wave of love and determination through our link. "Ready." With one last look back at the village that had been our home, we took our first steps into the unknown. The road ahead was long and winding, but as long as we had each other, I knew we could face whatever challenges lay in store. As we crested the first hill, I paused, taking out Martha's journal and a pencil. On the first blank page I wrote, "The adventure begins, the chronicles of Leif and Sarah." Sarah peered over my shoulder, a smile playing on her lips. "A bit dramatic, don't you think?" I grinned, feeling her amusement mingling with my own. "Maybe, but something tells me this is going to be a story worth telling." Hand in hand, minds and hearts intertwined, we set off towards the horizon. The next chapter of our lives was just beginning, and I couldn't wait to see where it would lead us. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Whispering Pines faded into the distance behind us. But the lessons we had learned there, about courage, sacrifice, and the power of love, would remain with us always, guiding us on the incredible journey that lay ahead. The road stretched before us, a ribbon of dusty brown cutting through the vibrant autumn landscape. Sarah and I had been traveling for 3 days, our backs to Whispering Pines and our faces turned towards an uncertain future. The weight of our packs and the ache in our feet were constant reminders of how far we'd come and how far we still had to go. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I felt a wave of fatigue wash over me. It wasn't just my own exhaustion. Through our link, I could sense Sarah's weariness as well. "We should start looking for a place to camp," I suggested, glancing at her. Sarah nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Agreed. My feet feel like they're about to fall off." We veered off the main road, following a small game trail into a copse of trees. As we set up our tent and gathered wood for a fire, I couldn't help but marvel at how in sync we'd become. Without speaking, we anticipated each other's needs, passing tools and completing tasks as if we'd been doing this for years instead of days. As the fire crackled to life, casting a warm glow over our little campsite, Sarah settled down beside me with a contented sigh. "You know," she said, a hint of amusement in her voice, "when I imagined leaving Whispering Pines, I always thought it would be for somewhere more exciting. A big city, maybe. Not wherever we are." I chuckled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You mean the middle of nowhere doesn't meet your standards, my lady?" She elbowed me playfully, but I could feel the undercurrent of melancholy beneath her humor. "I miss home," she admitted softly. "Me too," I said, pulling her closer. Through our link, I sent waves of comfort and reassurance, feeling her gratitude in return. As we sat in comfortable silence, watching the flames dance, I found my mind wandering to the purpose of our journey. "Sarah," I said hesitantly, "do you think we'll really find answers out here? About our connection, about what happened with Nyx?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought. "I don't know," she said finally, "but I have to believe we will. Otherwise, what are we doing out here?" I nodded, understanding her need for purpose. "Maybe we should try to, I don't know, practice? See what we can do with this link of ours?" Sarah sat up straighter, a spark of excitement in her eyes. "That's not a bad idea. We've been so focused on controlling it, we haven't really explored its potential." We spent the next hour experimenting, pushing the boundaries of our mental connection. We discovered that with concentration, we could share not just emotions and vague impressions, but actual images, like watching a hazy movie in our minds. "This is incredible," Sarah breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "Leaf, do you realize what this could mean? We could communicate over vast distances, share information instantly." I nodded, equally amazed. "It's like nothing I've ever heard of before. But Sarah, we need to be careful. We don't know the limits of this power or what using it might do to us in the long run." She sobered at that, understanding the weight of my words. "You're right, of course. We'll take it slow, document everything in Martha's journal." As the night deepened and we retired to our tent, I found myself lying awake, my mind buzzing with possibilities and questions. Beside me, I could sense that Sarah was equally restless. "Leif?" Her whisper cut through the darkness. "Are you awake?" "Yeah," I replied softly. "Can't sleep either?" I felt her shift, turning to face me. Even in the dark with our mental link, I could picture her expression perfectly, a mix of excitement and trepidation. I was thinking about Nyx, about the ritual. Do you think there are others out there like us? Other people who've encountered ancient magic? It was a question I'd been pondering myself. "It's possible," I said slowly. "The world's a big place. And if Nyx existed, who knows what other forces might be out there?" Sarah's hand found mine in the darkness, her fingers intertwining with my own. "Do you ever wonder if we did the right thing? Binding Nyx instead of, I don't know, trying to understand it?" I squeezed her hand, sensing the conflict in her emotions. "I think we did the only thing we could in that moment. Nyx was a threat to everything and everyone we loved. But maybe part of this journey is about finding a balance, learning to understand these forces without being consumed by them." Sarah's relief and gratitude flowed through our link, warming me from the inside out. "You always know what to say," she murmured, snuggling closer. As we drifted off to sleep, our minds intertwined. I couldn't shake the feeling that our real adventure was only just beginning. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a crispness in the air hinting at the coming winter. As we packed up our camp and set off down the road, there was a new sense of purpose in our steps. "So," Sarah said as we walked, "where exactly are we heading? We can't just wander aimlessly forever." I pulled out the map we'd been given, studying it thoughtfully. Martha mentioned an old library in a city to the east, supposed to have a collection of ancient texts. Might be a good place to start looking for information about magic and rituals. Sarah nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. How far? At our current pace? Probably another week or so. We fell into a comfortable rhythm as we walked, alternating between companionable silence and quiet conversation. Around midday, as we stopped for a brief rest, a sound caught my attention, the distant rumble of wagon wheels. Sarah heard it too, her head snapping up. "Travelers," she said, a note of excitement in her voice. We hadn't encountered anyone else on the road since leaving Whispering Pines. As the wagon came into view, I felt a flutter of nervousness. How much should we reveal about ourselves? We'd agreed to keep our abilities secret, but it felt strange to hide such a fundamental part of who we now were. The wagon was driven by an older man, his weather-beaten face creased in a friendly smile as he drew his horses to a stop beside us. "Well met, young travelers," he called out. "Don't often see folk on foot out this way. Where you headed?" Sarah and I exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between us in an instant. "East," I replied, deciding on a partial truth. "To the city of Lyria. We're scholars, of a sort, seeking knowledge in the great library there." The old man's eyebrows rose with interest. "Scholars, eh? Well, you're in for a treat. Lyria's library is a wonder, no doubt about it. Say, would you two care for a ride? These old bones don't mind the company, and it'll get you there a mite faster than walking." Another silent exchange passed between Sarah and me. The offer was tempting, but could we risk such close proximity to a stranger? What if our connection became obvious? In the end, curiosity and the promise of faster travel won out. "That's very kind of you," Sarah said, flashing a warm smile. "We'd be grateful for the ride." As we clambered into the back of the wagon, introducing ourselves to the old man, who called himself Einar, I couldn't shake a feeling of anticipation. Something told me this chance encounter was going to lead us down an unexpected path. Einar proved to be a wealth of information as we traveled, regaling us with tales of his journeys and the changes he'd seen in the land over the years. "Strange things happening these days," he mused as the sun began to set. "Folks talking about lights in the forest, voices on the wind. Some say the old magics are stirring." Sarah and I exchanged loaded glances, our link humming with shared tension. "What do you think about that?" I asked carefully. "About magic?" Einar was quiet for a long moment, his gnarled hands steady on the reins. "I think," he said finally, "that there's more to this world than most folks realize. And I think that knowledge, real knowledge, is both a gift and a burden." As we made camp that night, sharing a meal with Einar around the fire, I found myself studying the old man. There was a glint in his eye, a hint of something more behind his folksy exterior. I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more than he was letting on. "Tell me, Leif, Sarah," Einar said as we finished our meal. "What exactly is it you're hoping to find in Lyria's library?" I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. But Sarah, perhaps sensing something I didn't, decided to take a risk. "We're looking for information about ancient rituals," she said, her voice steady. "About magic that can connect people in unusual ways." Einar's bushy eyebrows rose, but he didn't seem surprised. "Unusual ways, eh? And would this have anything to do with the way you two seem to communicate without words?" I felt a jolt of shock, echoed by Sarah through our link. "How did you—" I began, but Einar held up a hand, chuckling softly. "I may be old, but my eyes still work just fine. And I've seen a thing or two in my travels. You two have a bond, something beyond the ordinary. Am I right?" Slowly, Sarah and I nodded. There was no point in denying it now. Einar leaned forward, his eyes gleaming in the firelight. "Then let me tell you a story. A story about an ancient order of mages who could share thoughts and emotions across vast distances. An order that was thought to be long extinct. Until now." As Einar's tale unfolded, painting a picture of a secret society that had shaped the course of history from the shadows, I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. If what he was saying was true, our journey was about to take a turn we never could have anticipated. "How do you know all this?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Einar smiled, and for a moment, I could have sworn I saw a flicker of something, a glow perhaps, or a shift in the air around him. "Let's just say," he replied enigmatically, "that I've been waiting a very long time for someone like you two to come along." As the fire crackled and the stars wheeled overhead, I realized that our quest for answers had only led to more questions. But with Sarah by my side, our minds and hearts linked in a bond beyond explanation, I felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The journey that had begun on that dusty road out of Whispering Pines was taking us places we never could have imagined, and something told me that this was only the beginning of a much greater adventure. The fire had died down to glowing embers casting long shadows across our small camp. Einar's words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Sarah and I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the information he had just shared. "An ancient order of mages," I repeated slowly, testing the words. "And you think we might be connected to them somehow?" Einar nodded, his weathered face serious in the flickering light. "Not just connected, my young friends. I believe you may be the first new members of the order to manifest in centuries." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes bright with curiosity. "But how is that possible? We've never heard of this order before, and our abilities only appeared after we performed a ritual to bind an ancient spirit." A knowing smile played at the corners of Einar's mouth. "Ah, but that's the beauty of it. The Order's power has always been latent in certain bloodlines, waiting for the right catalyst to awaken it. Your ritual, your sacrifice, it must have triggered something dormant within you both." I felt a surge of excitement from Sarah through our link, matched by my own growing fascination. "Tell us more about this order," I urged. "What were they capable of? What was their purpose?" Einar settled back, stroking his beard thoughtfully. The Order of the Mind Link, as they were known, was founded millennia ago by a group of scholars who discovered a way to connect their minds. At first, it was simple, sharing thoughts, emotions, memories. But as they honed their abilities, they found they could do so much more. "Like what?" Sarah asked, leaning in closer. "They could communicate across vast distances, share knowledge instantaneously, even combine their mental energies to perform feats of magic that would be impossible for a single mage," Einar explained. "But with great power came great responsibility. The Order swore to use their abilities only for the greater good, to work from the shadows to maintain balance in the world." I frowned, a thought occurring to me. If they were so powerful, why haven't we heard of them? Why did they disappear? Einar's expression grew somber. "Ah, therein lies the tragedy. As with many secret societies, the Order eventually fractured. Some members believed their power gave them the right to rule openly, to reshape the world as they saw fit. Others wanted to remain hidden, true to their original purpose." "Let me guess," Sarah interjected, her voice tight. "It led to conflict." Einar nodded gravely. "A conflict that nearly tore the world apart. In the end, those who remained true to the Order's principles made a difficult choice. They used their combined power to cast a great spell, one that would suppress the mind link ability in future generations. They believed it was better to let their power fade into legend than to risk it falling into the wrong hands again." A heavy silence fell over the camp as Sarah and I absorbed this information. Through our link, I could feel her mind racing, matching the whirlwind of my own thoughts. "But if they suppressed the ability," I said slowly, "how is it that Sarah and I have it now?" Einar's eyes twinkled with a mix of excitement and apprehension. "That, my young friends, is the question that has brought me to this lonely road. For years I've traveled these lands, searching for signs that the mind link was reawakening. And now at last I've found you." Sarah's hand found mine, squeezing tightly. "Who are you really, Einar? How do you know all this?" The old man sighed, suddenly looking every one of his many years. I am the last of the old order tasked with watching and waiting for the day when new mind-linkers would emerge. I've lived far longer than any man should, sustained by ancient magics, all in preparation for this moment. My mind reeled with the implications. So what happens now? What does this mean for us? Einar leaned forward, his voice urgent. It means, Leif and Sarah, that you have a choice to make. The power you possess is both a gift and a burden. You can choose to ignore it, to try and live normal lives, or you can embrace your heritage and help rebuild the order as it was meant to be. And if we choose to embrace it? Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil I could feel through our link. Then I will teach you, Einar replied. I will show you how to harness your abilities, how to use them responsibly. But I warn you, this path is not an easy one. There are those who would seek to exploit your power or destroy you for having it. I exchanged a long look with Sarah, our thoughts and emotions flowing freely between us. Fear, excitement, uncertainty, but underlying it all, a sense of purpose. We had set out on this journey seeking answers, and now they were being offered to us. We need time to think, I said finally, turning back to Einar. This is a lot to take in. The old man nodded, understanding in his eyes. Of course. Rest now. We can speak more in the morning. As Einar retired to his bedroll, Sarah and I retreated to our tent. Sleep, however, was far from our minds. Our link hummed with shared energy as we silently debated our options. What do you think? I asked eventually, breaking the silence. Do you believe him? Sarah was quiet for a moment, her emotions a complex swirl. I think he's telling the truth. Or at least, what he believes to be the truth. It explains so much about what's happened to us. I nodded, feeling the same. But joining this order, learning to use our abilities, it's a huge commitment. We'd be turning our backs on any chance of a normal life. A wave of determination flowed from Sarah. Leif, I think we both know our chance at a normal life disappeared the moment we confronted Nyx. We can't go back to who we were before. The question is, do we move forward and embrace this new path? As always, Sarah's clarity of thought helped crystallize my own feelings. You're right, I said, reaching out to take her hand. Whatever we decide, we're in this together. We spent much of the night talking, weighing the pros and cons, exploring the possibilities that Einar's revelation had opened up. By the time the first light of dawn began to filter through the tent canvas, we had reached a decision. We emerged from the tent to find Einar already awake, tending to a small breakfast fire. He looked up as we approached, a knowing glint in his eye. You've made your choice, he said. It wasn't a question. Sarah and I nodded in unison. We want to learn, I said firmly. We want to understand our abilities and use them to help others, like the original order intended. A smile broke across Einar's weathered face, transforming him. For a moment, I could see the powerful mage he must have been in his prime. Then let your training begin, he said, his voice ringing with authority. Over the next few days, as we continued our journey towards Lyria, Einar began to instruct us in the ways of the mind link. We learned exercises to strengthen our mental connection, techniques to filter out each other's thoughts when we needed privacy, and methods to extend the range of our communication. The key, Einar explained one evening as we practiced, is to think of your minds not as separate entities but as two halves of a greater whole. When you truly master the mind link, you'll be able to function as one consciousness when needed, while still maintaining your individual identities. It was challenging, often frustrating work. There were moments when the constant presence of another mind became overwhelming, leading to arguments and temporary blocks in our connection. But with each passing day, we grew stronger, more in tune with each other and with the subtle energies that flowed around us. As we neared Lyria, Einar's lessons took on a new urgency. The library there contains ancient texts that could greatly aid your training, he told us. But it also holds dangers. There are those who guard the old knowledge jealously, and others who would seek to use it for their own gain. How will we know who to trust? Sarah asked, a note of concern in her voice. Einar's expression was grave. Trust your instincts and trust in each other. The mind link gives you an advantage. It's much harder to deceive two linked minds than a single one. On the outskirts of Lyria, Einar brought our wagon to a halt. This is where we part ways for now, he said, his voice tinged with sadness. I've taught you what I can in this short time, but the rest of your journey is your own. You're not coming with us? I asked, surprised and a little apprehensive. Einar shook his head. My presence would draw too much attention. There are eyes in Lyria that would recognize me, and that could put you in danger. No, it's better that I remain in the shadows for now. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box. Take this, he said, pressing it into Sarah's hands. Inside you'll find a token that will grant you access to the restricted sections of the library. Show it to the head archivist. She'll know what it means. Sarah opened the box carefully, revealing a pendant made of a strange, iridescent metal. As she lifted it, I felt a faint hum of energy through our link. Remember, Einar said as we gathered our packs, you're not just seeking knowledge for yourselves. You're the first of a new generation of mind linkers. The choices you make, the way you use your abilities, it will shape the future of the Order. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders, echoed by Sarah's own feelings of apprehension and determination. We won't let you down, I promised. Einar smiled, a hint of his earlier twinkle returning to his eyes. I know you won't. Now go, and may the wisdom of the ancients guide your path. With final hugs and words of thanks, Sarah and I set off towards the gleaming spires of Lyria. As we walked, our minds linked and our steps in perfect sync, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement for what lay ahead. So, Sarah said, a hint of amusement in her voice, I guess we're not just scholars anymore. We're secret mages on a quest to rebuild an ancient order. I chuckled, sending a wave of affection through our link. Just another day in the life of Leif and Sarah, right? As we approached the city gates, I sobered, reminded of the challenges that awaited us. We'll need to be careful, I said quietly. Einar warned us about dangers, about people who might be after the same knowledge we're seeking. Sarah nodded, her mental presence a reassuring warmth in my mind. We'll watch each other's backs. And hey, with our mind link, we've got a secret weapon they won't be expecting. I smiled, drawing strength from her confidence. You're right. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. Hand in hand, minds intertwined, we stepped through the gates of Lyria. The bustling streets and towering buildings were a far cry from the quiet forests and small villages we were used to. But as we made our way towards the great library at the city's heart, I felt a sense of purpose stronger than any I'd ever known. We were no longer just Leif and Sarah from Whispering Pines. We were mind linkers, heirs to an ancient and powerful legacy. And our real journey, our real adventure, was only just beginning. As we navigated the crowded streets, our senses were overwhelmed by the sights, sounds, and smells of the big city. Merchants hawked their wares from colorful stalls. Street performers entertained crowds with feats of acrobatics and sleight of hand, and the air was thick with the aroma of exotic spices and sizzling street food. It's incredible, Sarah breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. Through our link, I could feel her excitement and curiosity mirroring my own. Focus, I reminded her gently, even as I marveled at a juggler tossing flaming torches high into the air. We need to find the library. We asked for directions several times, each person pointing us towards the center of the city. As we drew closer, the buildings grew taller and more ornate, until finally we rounded a corner and saw it. The Great Library of Lyria. The structure was breathtaking, a massive edifice of white stone and gleaming glass domes. Intricate carvings adorned its walls, depicting scenes from history and legend. A steady stream of people flowed in and out of its grand entrance, scholars in flowing robes, students laden with books, and curious visitors from all walks of life. As we climbed the wide steps leading to the entrance, I felt a tremor of nervousness from Sarah. "What if they don't believe us?" she whispered. "What if the token doesn't work?" I squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Then we'll figure something out. We've come too far to turn back now." Inside, the library was even more impressive. The ceiling soared high above us, supported by massive columns. Shelves stretched as far as the eye could see, filled with books and scrolls of every size and description. The air was heavy with the scent of old parchment and leather bindings. We approached a stern-looking woman seated at a large desk near the entrance. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she peered at us over half-moon spectacles. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone making it clear that she rather hoped she couldn't. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steadier than her emotions. "We need to speak with the head archivist, please. It's a matter of some urgency." The woman's eyebrows rose skeptically. "The head archivist is a very busy person. She doesn't have time for every young scholar who thinks their research is urgent." I felt a flash of frustration from Sarah, but before she could respond, I gently nudged her mind with a suggestion. She nodded almost imperceptibly. "We understand," Sarah said, reaching into her pocket. "But we were told to show her this." She placed Einar's token on the desk. The effect was immediate. The woman's eyes widened and she quickly snatched up the pendant, examining it closely. "Where did you get this?" she demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. "From a friend," I replied carefully. "Someone who said the head archivist would know what it means." The woman stood abruptly. "Wait here," she ordered, then hurried off into the depths of the library. As we waited, I could feel Sarah's mix of nervousness and excitement through our link. "What do you think will happen now?" she asked silently, using our mental connection to avoid being overheard. "I'm not sure," I replied in the same manner. "But I think we're about to find out if Einar's story about the order is really true." After what felt like an eternity, the woman returned, accompanied by an older, regal-looking woman with silver hair and piercing blue eyes. She carried herself with an air of authority that made it clear she was the head archivist. "Come with me," she said without preamble, turning on her heel and striding away. Sarah and I exchanged glances, then hurried to follow. She led us through a maze of bookshelves and reading rooms, finally stopping before an ornate door hidden in an alcove. With a wave of her hand and a muttered word, the door swung open silently. "Inside," she commanded. "Quickly now." We entered what appeared to be a private study, its walls lined with ancient tomes and curious artifacts. The head archivist closed the door behind us, then turned to face us, her expression a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "Now then," she said, her voice sharp. "You'll tell me exactly who you are and how you came to possess that token." I took a deep breath, glancing at Sarah. Through our link, we agreed silently on how much to reveal. "My name is Leaf," I began, "and this is Sarah. We're from a small village called Whispering Pines. A few months ago, we underwent an experience that changed us, gave us abilities we don't fully understand." The archivist's eyes narrowed. "What kind of abilities?" Sarah stepped in. "We can communicate mentally, share thoughts, emotions, even sensory experiences. We thought we were alone in this until we met a man named Einar on the road." At the mention of Einar's name, the archivist's composure slipped for just a moment. "Einar," she breathed. "So the old fool is still alive." "You know him?" I asked, surprised. She waved a hand dismissively. "That's not important right now. Continue your story." We took turns explaining our encounter with Einar, his tales of the Order of the Mind Link, and his instructions to seek out the library. As we spoke, the archivist's expression grew increasingly thoughtful. When we finished our explanation, the archivist's expression had grown increasingly thoughtful. She remained silent for a long moment, studying us intently before finally speaking. "I never thought I'd see the day," she said softly, almost to herself. New mind linkers after all this time.